Friends, hello everyone. Today I will tell you about the structure of the famous Vietnamese tunnels. Despite the fact that life in them was thought out to the smallest detail, staying in them cannot be called comfortable. But what can you do? War is a dangerous thing.
In general, Vietnamese tunnels were distinguished by their diversity of shapes and sizes. Some of them simply led to shelters where the Vietnamese hid from American raids on villages. Others were single-level but very long. Still others were multi-level complexes with some amenities. The Americans never managed to find most of the tunnels, and even those that were found were not always fully explored by the Americans. The minimum depth of the tunnels was more than 1 meter, and some reached more than 10 meters in depth. Long tunnels could be straight or slightly curved, but most often they were zigzagging, at angles of 60 or 120 with intervals. Special settling basins were created for water, where water flowed during the rainy season. Therefore, straight tunnels were dangerous for flooding. In extreme cases, during the rainy season, some tunnels could be abandoned. The settling basins were pits, or 90-degree bends in the floor. A person had to dive to move on. Additionally, the water blocked the spread of tear gas and protected from the shock wave. The cross-section of the tunnels was usually a mantra wide and from 1 meter to 1.5 meters high. Usually, the tunnel narrowed towards the ceiling to provide stability. If possible, they tried to dig them in dense soil, where supports were not required. If the soil was loose, the tunnel was covered with bamboo spacers, and pillars were also installed to provide stability. Particular attention was paid to camouflaging the entrance to the tunnel. These entrances were slightly raised above the ground. They varied in shape. They could be very tiny or 2 by 2 meters in size, for bringing in large objects or equipment. Doors could be made of both earth and wood. The advantage of earthen doors over wooden ones was that they were more difficult to detect. The entrance was located in unexpected and inconspicuous places, on steep slopes, cliffs on the banks of streams or even below the river level. Inside a cattle pen, camouflaged with cattle manure, civilians often helped to camouflage and seal the entrance. Most of the entrances were vertical shafts, but some were made at an angle with steps. Of course, various traps awaited the Americans in the tunnels. We will talk about Vietnamese traps in the next video on this channel. At first the Vietnamese made mistakes by placing the entrances close to each other. Later the Viet Cong became more cunning. Dead ends, false walls, hidden hatches, etc. appeared in the tunnels. Sometimes even brickwork was used. Hollow bamboo and pipes were used for ventilation, which were located at certain intervals. The deeper the tunnels, the harder it was to breathe, especially since the Vietnamese did not invent forced ventilation. Often the ventilation hole was placed at an angle to prevent rain from getting in. Ventilation was camouflaged inside bamboo thickets, among tree roots, and also house supports. Some hatches were covered with sandbags to prevent the blast wave. The Vietnamese often set up ambushes by throwing grenades at the Americans. Using the bends in the tunnels, others threw spears at the enemy, because the shooting in the tunnels was deafening. There was no single plan for creating tunnels. They all differed in a variety of shapes and sizes. They could branch out, connect, narrow and widen. Some where the passages were made too narrow that only a thin and agile person could get through with difficulty. Of course, the passages were equipped with rooms, bedrooms, kitchens, medical centers, headquarters. Once even an American tank was shoved into a tunnel. Kitchens were usually located closer to the surface to facilitate ventilation. Deep vertical shafts served as water reservoirs. Water was also stored in barrels and clay jugs. In addition to tunnels, natural caves were also used. But life in the tunnels was generally hard. The constant dampness, stuffiness and confined space could cause claustrophobia. It was easier for those who were familiar with tunnels from childhood, to say nothing of the Americans who had to clean these tunnels.